A very good morning, afternoon, and evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to all of you. I'm your virtual host, Diksha Rena, and it's my pleasure and privilege to welcome each and every one of you at LMHI Global Colloquium 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, to start with the next session of the day, I would like to invite our chairperson, Dr. Professor Ashley Ross and Dr. Pierre Janssen. As the moderators for this session, I would take the honor to invite Dr. Madhu Maharaj and Dr. Bianca D. Kenha. The theme for this session is Homeopathic Pathogenetic Trials and Global Strategy. I'll now hand over to our moderators. Over to you, ma'am.
Welcome. Thank you so much for the introduction. Welcome to our greater homeopathic community, as well as to our honored delegates, our attendees, organizers, the LMHI executives, and especially to our respected chairpersons, respected speakers for the session. I'm Dr. Madhu Maharaj. I'm from South Africa, and I'm a moderator for the session. My co-moderator is Dr. Bianca de Canha, who's the chairperson of the Homeopathic Association of South Africa. We have a profound, insightful, and deep topic today. The topic for the session is the homeopathic pathogenetic trials and global strategies. So this afternoon, our panel of experts are firstly our chairpersons, Professor Ashley Ross from South Africa and Dr. J.P. Janssen from the Netherlands. And many of you may recall that Professor Ross and Dr. Janssen are experts in the field of homeopathic pathogenetic trials. Our speakers and other experts are Dr. Todd Hoover from the United States of America, Dr. Helene Renaud from France, and Dr. Preeta Mehra from India. Dear colleagues, a little housekeeping before we begin. Please be kindly reminded that you have 30 minutes allocated for your presentation, and we will be conducting a question and answer session for about 10 minutes after the last speaker's presentation. It now gives me great pleasure to hand you over to Professor Ashley Ross, who will introduce the topic for today, as well as introduce the various speakers together with the esteemed Dr. Janssen. Professor Ross.
Thank you, Dr. Maharaj, for that introduction, and welcome colleagues and friends to this last session of the LMHI Global Colloquium 2021. It is indeed my honor to be able to chair this session with such esteemed colleagues. As a reminder, the LMHI and the ECH in 2013 and 2014 collaborated under Dr. Janssen and my leadership in developing the harmonized guidelines for homeopathic provings. So our association goes back quite a long way, and it really is a great honor for me to be able to chair a session that contains within its lineup Dr. Todd Hoover, whom I'll introduce in a few minutes, and Dr. Helene Renaud, who is a very respected proving colleague. So by way of introducing Dr. Hoover is the Secretary of the Homeopathic Pharmacopoeia of the United States, the HPCUS. He is a board-certified family medicine and homeopathic medicine practitioner who has practiced for over 30 years. He has also held various other leadership positions. He is a past president of the American Institute of Homeopathy. He was the national vice president for the US with the LMHI. And he has worked quite extensively over the last 10 years or so, leading various teams of the HPCUS around proving guidelines. More recently, Dr. Hoover has been actively pursuing the discipline of yoga, which probably brings about the calm that I typically associate with Dr. Hoover. And in view of his deep involvement with the HPUS, it really is very exciting for us to be able to hear from him in respect to his title, Real World Application of the Harmonized Proving Guidelines, 8 years of experiences at the HPCUS. So Dr. Hoover, without further ado, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ashley. That was a very nice introduction, and it's my great pleasure to be here this morning. My time, I know it's the midday and evening for others. I appreciate the people from India who are often challenged with the time zone issues. So I've been spending the last couple of days chairing a few sessions of the Congress, and this morning when I woke up, I had one of those in the shower moments where you have a kind of epiphany. And what I realized is that I came to homeopathy as a conventional doctor, as an allopath, as many of my colleagues have. And it was the first case that I saw where there was a dramatic improvement. It happened to be a dog with an intestinal obstruction near death that was revived within minutes after taking opium 200. And I had this kind of like, aha, there's really something here to this. Because I didn't have a lot of belief necessarily in homeopathy. I didn't have like a blind belief. So the credibility that these ultra dilute substances should actually do something, I was quite impressed by the case. And what I realized in listening to the talks over the last few days is that we are trying to translate that direct experience. So in yoga, we call that vidya, that direct experience, direct knowledge, like learning how to ride a bicycle. So, well, you just get on. And we're trying to create that experience for allopaths, for conventional medicine doctors, for regulators to understand what homeopathy is and the miracle that it is and that it works. For us, we had the direct experience and we've seen, but for them, they have to see that through our case studies, through our research, et cetera. And it's hard to translate that. So our job is really to destroy this credibility issue, is that translation process. And I'd say that 99% of this conference has been around that. How do we bridge that gap? The second epiphany in homeopathy for me came in provings. So the first time, and I've been fortunate enough to watch a proving kind of unfold, be part of the supervision process, unwrap all of the information and see the coalescence of data as it forms the remedy picture in front of your eyes, and to see the synchronicity of provers' experiences. It's the second time in homeopathy where I've had like, aha, this really does work. There is a method to this madness. And so those experiences are very valuable. And although we spend 99% of our time focused on the cases and the research data, we're spending 1% on provings, but provings is the other big pillar of homeopathy, along with our case experiences. So these guidelines, and I'm going to give a little history of where they came from, are part of our translation of this experience that we have to the greater society. So as we know, provings came about. Initially, the idea arose to von Haller, some question of if he ever had conducted a proving, but his experiences around camphora, he came up with the idea that you have to try this stuff out on a healthy person before you start treating the sick, and you have to observe the effects. Hahnemann really took this to heart and did a great study and produced most of the foundations of what we use for homeopathic provings today. And he really focused on, it has to be a single medicine. We have to look at the poisonings. We have to look at both primary and secondary effects. And reproduction of symptoms in multiple provers is very important. So he laid out a bunch of rules for us. 1885, the AIH set down another set of rules because they were running a lot of provings at the time. They started organizing it a bit further. They said, blinding would be a good idea. Let's make it a little bit more scientific. They were the first, really homeopaths were the first set of scientists to use blinding in this way in human subjects. The use of placebos or blanks was also invented by homeopaths long before the allopaths came up with the idea. Blinding of the director to the attenuation was done. No doses once the symptoms occur. the introduction of objective measures and the importance of objective measures. And they said at least 5 provers would be a good idea. They also talked about differences in ages, genders, temperaments, etc. I was part of this process of harmonization with Ashley. I can't remember the LMHI conference that we were at, but discussed where the HPCUS was at. And he was working on the LMHI guidelines at the time. And we looked at this. And I also remember a conference in Barcelona where we worked with the ECH to some extent, kind of hashing through differences. But in 2013, 2014, the guidelines really came together in all these domains and were very similar in nature. So if we kind of take the traditional parameters that came before these new harmonized guidelines, we have the things that we talked about, the healthy provers, need single substance, et cetera. And then what these new guidelines added, I'm going to kind of move this out of my way, were a lot of the modern important aspects of trials, which is informed consent, ethics committee reviews, insurance, adverse event reporting, unblinding procedures, data protection, attenuation, being within a certain range, which was kind of standardized, which hadn't been prior to that time, and increasing the number of provers to around 10 to 20. So what was added was a huge layer of safety and patient subject protection, transparency, bias reduction, the reproducibility of such provings by creating parameters for them, the generalizability of these provings, and the protection of data through the process. All of this leading to greater validity, which helps us translate the experience of proving to those people who are just reading it, such as regulators or our conventional medicine colleagues. Now, moving specifically to the Pharmacopoeia of the United States, we use the provings for official monograph purposes. So when we want to add a monograph to the Pharmacopoeia, we use provings as part of that process. Our aims in monograph review are to identify the substance, to make sure the manufacturing has an established methodology, to look at the toxicology and establish a first safe dilution, to evaluate the safety in first human tests through the proving. But the real goal for the proving for us is to establish the clinical usefulness of the medicine. Is this medicine going to be able to be used by the average homeopath? So for that, we need some kind of minimum clinical picture. It's like, well, what are you going to use the drug for? So if you have 4 or 5 symptoms, being fatigue, chilliness, and difficulty getting to sleep, you'll have a hard time using that remedy and differentiating it from other medicines. With the help of the guidelines, the Pharmacopoeia developed review teams. So we go through 4 steps of review of the proving itself, which is outside of the substance identification, et cetera, other aspects of the review process for monographs. So we have a methodology team that looks at the protocol. We look at how the study was conducted. We review the safety, and ultimately we look at the outcomes. And the questions we need to answer are, is this a homeopathic drug? Are the outcomes valid? Was there enough transparency, and was the study conducted appropriately? Is the medicine safe to be used in humans? And is there a clear clinical target that can be identified? So we've been looking at these for 8 years, and I'm kind of proud, the Pharmacopoeia has really been a very formal peer review process for provings. And to my knowledge, it's one of the first examples of that. Maybe the AIH did it in the turn of the century time period when they had their proving bureau. But this is a very formal process of review that we go through. In those 8 years, 15 provings prior to 2013 were revised and then reviewed using the new guidelines, and 10 new provings were conducted after that time point using the guidelines to help design and conduct the provings. So 25 reviews were conducted, 7 different investigators, multiple kinds of designs. The earlier ones used crossover designs, which I have some heartache about, in terms of carryover of effects. Some used only a run-in placebo control, and the more recent ones were typically randomized, unbalanced designs in accordance with the guidelines. The average number of approvers for all of these were 25.5, or the range of 10 to 32. The average female to male ratio was 2 to 1. And we do see dropouts typically in the range of 2, so about almost 8% of the population drops out on average. This was probably more predominant prior to 2013. Overall, the average number of symptoms per proving is around 204, which is interesting. Some of the Indian provings I was looking at this week had symptoms outcomes in the range of 30. And some of these earlier provings had 44 to 571. But you know, it's a pretty big range of symptoms. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. We did characterize the symptoms into several categories to help us understand a symptom picture, which was one of the goals of the HPCUS process. Unexpected improvements were seen in about 5 examples per proving on average. The range is 0 to 51. Highly characterized symptoms, meaning symptoms which had a lot of rich features and were clearly characterized or happened frequently. They were teased out of the provings at an average of 6.3 symptoms per proving. Symptoms with at least one strong feature, about 147, and symptoms that were a little bit more vague, about 45 on average per proving. We did see adverse events these are aggregate data here instead of averages. The total number of adverse events over the 25 provings were 66. Possibly related adverse events, 16. So these are after a causality analysis is done, the determination is it could be related to the proving substance. Serious adverse events, as defined by the ICH guidelines, there were 4 in all of the provings, but none of them were possibly related. You can't really, from a single proving, define an adverse drug reaction. And therefore, serious adverse drug reactions likewise can't be defined from the results of one proving. So some of the outliers we saw, the symptom range was highly varied from proving to proving, 44 to 571. So this is a pretty big gap, pretty big range. We saw before 2013, 122 on average. After 2013, 351 on average. So I don't know the significance of that or not, but clearly more symptoms are being brought out in provings. It may be different PIs having different results, we're not sure. Variations in the improvement of symptoms from 0 to 51. So again, this was increased after 2013. Adverse event reporting before 2013, 0.5 or less on average per proving, and 7 per proving after 2013. So I think we see that the guidelines clearly raised the awareness of adverse event reporting and clarified it. One proving was conducted with a non-typical substance. It was a combined remedy of similar tissues from a pig due to the manufacturing requirements. And one proving, this is kind of interesting. There was 15 provers, 441 symptoms, but one prover had 309 symptoms, including 112 out of emotional symptoms and 197 physical symptoms. So the question, you know, for such a imbalanced proving, the question is, what does that mean? So is that sensitive prover kind of oversensitive, giving us data that's not usable, or is it very good data? These are some of the questions that arise. Ultimately, we're looking for the usability of a medicine based on the proving for pharmacopoeia purposes. And I just give a couple of simple examples here. Magnesium gluconate, magnesium orotate. You'll recognize many magnesium symptoms in the 2 charts. About the same number of symptoms were brought out in both provings, but clearly for magnesium gluconate, you have abdominal GI tract tendency of the drug, whereas in the orotate, we see a little bit more menstrual tendency, a little bit more headache tendency, almost similar to maybe mag-carb or mag-phos. So they clearly look like magnesium remedies from the proving, which is nice, but there are clear differences, and we could differentiate these two very similar remedies. A couple of other provings, these are from the pig. One is a intervertebral disc, the other is uterine tissue. So these are sarcodes. Here we see, although they come from the same animal, these two different tissues, one was associated with aggravation from music, one was amelioration from music. One, the discus has a clear affinity for joints, bones, muscle tissues where there's a kind of locked up or misaligned sensations, whereas the issues with uterine Swiss, the uterus tissue, affected different areas of the body, including the menstrual periods, the brain, the head, specifically. Where there was muscle symptoms, it's almost opposite of the discus, where stretching helped and the discus showed worse with motion. So what do we learn? Over the course of these proving reviews, we saw that the peer review process seemed to be having an effect overall on proving quality. The pictures that were being developed from these provings were much clearer in the post-2013 provings compared to the ones before. We looked at some pre-1960 provings that weren't included in this list as part of the same committee structures, and a lot of those showed poor transparency, and the validity was brought into question for those reasons. So that the guidelines have certainly helped in that respect. There is still a fair variability in adverse event reporting and ADR reporting, especially when comparing provings prior to the guidelines to the current ones. So it seems that the guidelines are helping in that respect. One of the SAEs, serious adverse events, was a miscarriage. And although it was determined that it was to be, the causality is very unlikely to be related to the proving substance, it brought up the notion that pregnancy testing before entering a female subject into a proving is almost a requirement at this point, but certainly a strong recommendation to avoid such situations where it's brought into question whether or not the substance somehow had some relationship. The other thing we've seen is well-conducted provings demonstrate clear differences between substances. This is something we kind of know from our experiences, but now we've actually been able to demonstrate it through a clear peer review process. And when looking from one principal investigator to another, we see some variability, but really it's modest. Overall, using the new guidelines, there's much more consistency proving to proving. So what are our opportunities? I feel there's a very strong need to help validate HPTs as a drug discovery tool. We believe that they work, just like we have a belief in homeopathy being effective clinically when we see a case that's dramatically improved. But we need to translate that direct experience into meaningful information for regulators and for our colleagues who are not in this field. So how do we do that? How do we validate HPTs? The work has not yet been done. We need to demonstrate that provings translate into clinical reliability. So although we understand that provings are a starting point, there should be some efforts made in research to show that provings do lead to successful clinical use. And this may be related to some of the work that Lex Ruten's doing in likelihood ratios in the future. We need to refine our methods and conduct of studies to improve the clinical usefulness of provings. Improve the precision and consistency of observation. So sometimes we see that some people are observing something as a symptom where other people may not observe it as symptoms. And I believe this accounts for the variability we're seeing in the number of symptoms that are produced per proving, whereas some threshold for what constitutes a symptom. So perhaps through better definitions of what is a symptom, what is not a symptom, what is a sign, what is not a sign, what is improved, what is not improved. This may help the PIs in their design of the provings and in their conduct of the provings in order to say, all right, this is a symptom, this is not a symptom. We have set out some definitions for AE, ADR versus proving events versus aggravations, but this may need to be refined over time. Technically, I think the conventional establishment might consider every proving symptom to be an AE by definition, although these are expected occurrences, and therefore we have put them into the category of proving symptoms rather than AEs. So where is that line, and is that something that needs to change over time? Should be readdressed. This notion of sensitive provers, one prover has 70% of the symptoms, what does that mean? We did a little quick and dirty study with belladonna one time, and where we did real-time observation without knowing who took the remedy and who didn't, and had the challenge the homeopaths to try and figure out who are the people who took the remedy. And the person with actually the strongest symptoms turned out to have been a placebo patient. So we need to try and figure out, are we measuring a sensitive person who's having a kind of generalized response to all remedies? Or is that sensitive person actually producing significant symptoms relevant to the medicine being tested? Another idea that might be used in the future is refined provings or follow-on provings. If we do have patients who develop a rich picture of the medicine, could that person then be used in a subsequent proving of the same medicine to develop a more clear picture of the remedy? So this is something that is a possibility for the future. Oops, wrong direction. So I want to thank you for your time. I think probably I got finished in the appropriate amount of time because I was shooting for 20 minutes rather than 30. So hopefully that's the case.
Thank you, Todd. Yes, you took 22 minutes or so. Thank you for the presentation. Some of what you've been talking about has seemed crazily familiar to me over the last couple of years. But I think the engagement of the HBCUS with the harmonized guidelines has been really positive for homeopathic proving understanding. One of the areas that for myself that I had to battle with initially in terms of the harmonized guidelines themselves was the notion of an adverse event. And the idea, which I think still persists within the homeopathy world, that adverse events don't happen in provings. And as you've indicated, it's very often a fine line between what is simply a proving symptom and what ought to be defined as an adverse event. And then once we've done that, what do we do with it? And what do we do with the symptom in terms of inclusion or exclusion from a proving? But something else which I thought was interesting was the observation of more symptoms in more recent provings. And I was wondering to what extent proper preparation of provers was contributing to that, the sort of just handing someone something and saying, write down what happens, as opposed to really inducting people into the experiment, the expectations of the experiment, and educating them and verifying that they've been educated in terms of journaling. Of course, the risk on the other side of that is that every symptom becomes a symptom. And so linked to that idea of educating people to journal appropriately, an area which I still think needs quite a lot of debate, is what do we do with symptoms that arise in approving, and to what extent, and I know it's very contentious, to what extent do we use an eliminating methodology? As in it was produced in a placebo approver, therefore it cannot be included as a verum symptom. And the other side of that, which essentially holds that as soon as I am initiated into approving, then every symptom I produce is a proving symptom. And so this is a gray area which I think we're still going to have to work through. But I think what's really valuable in the harmonized guideline, and it was an explicit intention of the harmonized guideline, and I know even though the HPCUS has its own guideline very much aligned, what we're seeing, I think, is because the methodology is becoming tighter and more uniform to some extent, we're beginning to be able to compare what would have been apples and oranges at some point, where we were using completely different methodologies. We were using a broad range of potencies. We were analyzing data in completely different ways. And by narrowing the number of variables, we're starting to get to the point where we're better able to define the experiment and better able to discuss relationships between individual provings, because the events are in many respects more similar, which I think is really valuable. And obviously the work that I've been engaged in has been quite strict, but I would encourage attendees of this session to go off and look at that harmonized guideline and try as far as possible to align to it, because it will help us in the long run in terms of consistency and being able to argue the validity of what comes out of the experiment. Thanks, Todd, for stirring up a whole lot of thoughts and considerations and debates, certainly in my mind.
Give me 5 seconds just for one comment.
Yeah.
It's a lot like what you're describing is background noise versus the gold of the proving. And it's a lot like case taking. You know, the patient has symptom, and then for some reason they say something and it's like your ears perk up, right? And you say, whoa, there's a symptom. And a lot of the cases from the old masters, they had like 6 symptoms, right? So they write their case out, it has 6 symptoms. You know that the patient didn't have 6 symptoms, they had 100 symptoms, but the symptoms that kind of rose up out of the dross was the goal. But we have very poorly defined how to do that. You know, I mean, that's what every homeopathic training is about. How do you figure out what's the most important symptoms? But we haven't really captured the essence of that. And I'm not sure it's possible without a lot of training. I don't know how to introduce it to provings.
Yeah, that's very valid. And I think another aspect which is important is that approving is in a sense a first pass on what the therapeutic potential of a substance is, and some of that, you know, there may even be too many symptoms in approving as we produce it now, and over time we will lift out of that the 5, 6, 7 symptoms that really are. You know, our understanding of pulsatilla and Nat Muir has not come out of the provings themselves, but out of the application of that proving information. So there is only so much that we know at the end of a proving. But it would be useful if you could get a greater degree of clarity earlier on, because then the uptake of the remedy becomes that much easier, because there's more to pin it on. And so our understanding of the remedy is accelerated, rather than when we have a plethora of symptoms that don't hang together very well, the odds are we're going to prescribe something else. And so we don't develop an experience of the symptom. So that leads us perfectly, I think, Todd, into Hélène Renou's presentation. Hélène is a stalwart of homeopathic provings, actually. Been producing homeopathic provings for quite a long time, specifically within the context of homeopathic education. Hélène herself is a medical doctor with additional training in homeopathy since 1995. She has served in a number of leadership positions within the French homeopathic landscape, and her most notable leadership position in the recent past was as president of the European Committee for Homeopathy until very recently, a couple of months ago in 2021. And Helene will be sharing with us her provings of 3 trees: Sequoiadendron giganteum, Cedrus libani, and Fagus sylvatica. Helene, welcome, and we're really looking forward to your presentation. Thank you. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I can begin. So hello everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me to present my proving work. I think it's a good opportunity to show you the implementation of proving works in the real homeopathic life. So I will introduce my work on 3 trees, as you said. You know that in the last 15 years, I've been proving a range of homeopathic medicinal products with homeopathic students and using the long-term double-blinded methodology, and also with experienced physicians in working groups using the trituration methodologies. And I think that both methodologies are informative and coherent, and they give really interesting insight into the properties of the medicines. And among them, 3 remedies are a strong entity. And having the opportunity to collect and to compare the outcomes of several of them, this allowed interesting findings. And I have chosen to focus on big trees. And I think these trees are carrying meaningful symbolic histories rooted in our culture. And this, for me, the analysis was facilitated by my own experience and knowledge. And first, I would say that trees have in common some characteristics that can help find them when the patient address the tree's themes. And the first theme is the resistance. I think it's a key one. This means in a situation where some difficulties or opposition make things hard to achieve, these patients used to stand strong and resistant. The second one is the rigidity, and it's a consequence of the resistance. And the stiffness, you can find it in the mental schemes and strongly rooted opinions and principles that can lead to a rigid behavior that can be felt as conservative. And the stiffness, also, you can find it in the physical symptoms, and you know it's the indication of rheumatic pains or cardiovascular symptoms. Pressure. It's a logical, and when one resists strongly, this induces pressure, and the pressure situation are often the weak point and the reason for consultation of these patients. And anger then can be a reaction towards the pressure and the way to express the rigid resistance, and it's interesting to make the difference between the angers according to the trees. And the last, but not the least symptom, are the memories. I think it's meaningful with regard to the long lifetime of trees and their overview on the changing landscapes around them. So once you have this strong theme in mind, this could lead you to consider that 3 patients are old-fashioned, rigid, and angry person. And actually in everyday lives, they much more appear as kind, faithful, protective characters that are both resistant and fragile and can really be a blessing to their relatives. I love 3 person, especially after doing these provings. So the first one, the sequoia, and it was performed in 2010 with 12 provers and 12 supervisors as part of the training in my homeopathic school in Paris. And to comply with the double-blind procedure, neither the provers nor the faculty members were aware of the nature of the remedy we were proving. And a set of placebo was inserted in the randomly distributed doses so that the provers had it clear in mind and they may have received Viram or placebo. And all the symptoms were collected during 3 months. Even so, the most of them appeared in the first 3 weeks. But this long-term period of collection was useful to make sure that no long-term symptomatology was ignored. And you know that the sequoia, the giant sequoia, is an ancient tree which survived the Great Glaciation only in California. But this survivor is also a champion because of its size, because of its longevity, and because of its living conditions. And the main symptoms that appeared in this experiment were first memory, past ancestors, and many dreams of the past of the ancestors. And the most remarkable were the transgenerational memories. And I can give some examples. For example, one prover had a dream of her ancestors in Ellis Island nearby Manhattan, you know, the temporary camp where migrants were parked before entering the American country. And this was really amazing as to see it. And another one, a Belgian prover, had a dream, harsh and difficult dream of torture as it happened in the Belgian Congo in the past. The second theme was the peace of mind versus the anger. And the peace of mind, you know, when someone is very peaceful and very efficient at work, but on the other hand, you had terrible anger, uncontrollable anger, and people locked in the anger. The third very interesting symptoms, you know, when you read the result of approving, you're really able to see the theme that emerged among the fog of all the collected symptoms. It was the solitude and the feeling that you feel taller than the others. And the one sentence was, "I'm the boss and I stand above." And this was notified in the mental expression of the patient, even though the patient don't express it specifically, but you can see this as a physician. And in the physical symptoms, we had pains in the heart of liver region. Most of the time, there was stitching pain and heat sensation. And we had a lot of heat sensation. I think each location in the body was affected by this, from the nose, the ears, the face, but also burning pain in the stomach, burning pain in the abdomen, burning stools, burning urination, and burning in a sore throat. I think each location in the body was affected by the burning pain. And very interesting and unexpected symptom was the delusion to have the movement of the living being inside, as if you were pregnant, but it was not for pregnant provers. We had no pregnant provers, thanks God. And for example, even another prover had the delusion that there was a finger inside his skull that was poking and scratching inside his skull. And the key symptom, I think, the modality of the motion, which ameliorates the arms and the legs, but aggravates back pain. Yes?
Sorry, Helene, is there a presentation or not?
No, you don't see it?
No, we can't see it. So I was just wondering.
Sorry.
It sounded like you were talking to an image. Sorry.
Oh, I was supposed to share my screen. Okay. So I will try again to share my screen. I'm sorry. Yes, I was telling about the most important key symptoms of sequoia. You know, the modality of the motion which ameliorates the arms and legs, but aggravates back pain. You know, like the tree with its solid trunk and its mobile branches. Oh. So I had the opportunity to take care of many acute cases with this modality for rheumatic pains. And several chronic cases were successfully treated with the mental picture of haughtiness, inner strength, and uncontrolled angers. And I even recently managed to soothe an hypertensive crisis for a patient, and fitting quite well with the mental feature. The girl was overwhelmed by anger in a strong hierarchic structure and suffering both the back pain with the sequoia modality and the high blood pressure. And actually, well, for this patient, I was expecting to treat only a back pain, and I was very surprised to see her get rid of cardiovascular imbalance situation. But it was very strong clinical confirmation. So as a summary for Sequoia, I think I used to think of Sequoia dendron giganteum when I see patients with a OT behavior, very demanding. When it's about violent angers, may it be the patient or someone in his surrounding. For stitching pain in the heart or the liver area or in the abdomen. And when I notice this very specific modality of the motion which ameliorates the limbs pains and aggravates back pain, and above all, when the patients feel strong enough to consider the challenges of their lives with confidence in their capacities to overcome them, I think just to remind this, it is the yes we can. So the second tree I want to talk to you about is the Cedrus libani. It's in 2016. It's a multi-center trial with two different methodology. One long-term double-blind provings with around 15 provers in the school that were homeopathic students, and another simple blinded trituration proving with 7 homeopathic physicians in a working group. And they both groups drew a very comprehensive picture of this important tree. And I think Cedrus is a highly symbolic tree. It's involved in the 3 main monotheistic religions, and this appeared in the provers' testimonies and the clinical picture of the few cured cases. You know that the Lebanon cedar is quoted more than 100 times in the Holy Bible. It's Middle East and Indian temples used it a lot, and it was also widely used for shipbuilding and for sarcophagus in ancient Egypt. And the oldest document available, the Epic of Gilgamesh, uses this tree to embody the place where a human being tried to challenge godness. And the most prominent physical symptoms of this experiment were, during the proving, the hypertensive flare-up of one prover and the cure of a long-lasting hemophiliac arthropathy for another one. So most of the physical symptoms were related to a congestive tendency of the upper part of the body, with no headache, with temple pressure, and nose bleeding, chest oppression, sweating in the upper part of the body, and the anger with a red hot face. And while the lower part of the body was seen quite depleted, with the cold feet, heaviness in the lower limbs, and the sweating coldness in the lower part of the body. And blood was a major theme in dream and in physical expression, with red eyes, nose bleeding, metallic taste in saliva, and this hemophiliac that was very old symptoms were improved, and I think nearly 5 years afterward, it's still working. I've been in contact with this guy. And the main mental feature was the challenging attitude. People were rebellious towards the hierarchy and couldn't care less attitude about admonition, even a provocative behavior. And this is very interesting and very specific to this tree. And also the intense anger that you can find here also, when people are very angry, their faces becomes hot and burning. And it can even lead to a paranoid tendency, because we have one prover who said that she had the delusion that the friends are liar and betray her, and she's suspicious, and she imagines people are talking behind her back. And this was strongly confirmed by some cured cases. You know, but what's interesting with treatment, as soon as the proving is finished, you can prescribe it. And I had the opportunity to prescribe quite quickly. And the challenging behavior expressed itself according to the situation of each patient. And for example, I had the opportunity to calm down a very turbulent child who was challenging, especially his father and the teacher of school. And he was mainly seeking exchanges with the older children that he was admiring and expecting them to be as equal schoolmates, or the babies that he could easily protect, but not those of the same age as him. And the remedy diagnosis was supported by his hot hand and cold feet peculiarity. And with adults that are bound to respond to this medicine, I found out that they were suffering cold feet, head congestion, and the authoritative behavior and much stress having to deal with authority. And actually, when I chose this tree, I was expecting symptoms of spirituality and even of mysticism, because the cedar tree has the reputation of being a tree of concord and resurrection. But the pathogenetic accounts have shown a more incisive and challenging picture. I mean, challenging God rather than appeasing him. And I think this is a good example of the limits of clinical extrapolations based on the existing knowledge of the raw material or the plant family. Because instead of the expected symptoms common to many conifers, such as the fragility like thin glass or the delusion to have a living being inside, the most prominent symptoms were the vascular congestion of the upper body. So just to summarize about this cedrus remedy, I think you can think of it as an appropriate treatment when there is a congestive clinical picture with high blood pressure or any other congestive symptom of the upper part of the body with a patient whose behavior is challenging authority while looking for spiritual elevation and mighty power. And the third tree I want to talk about is the beech tree, Fagus sylvatica. And this experiment took place in Strasbourg in France on the 11th November 2018 with 12 homeopaths. It means it took place day by day, 1 century after the end of the First World War, in a place where its consequences have been crucial, because this region was one of the main reasons of the conflict between France and Germany. And we choose the methodology of a C4 trituration proving with a working group of 12 experienced homeopaths from this region. And I gave an individual mortar to each participant with a powder in C1 potency with a saccharide lactose powder. And each prover was just triturating his own mortar, noting his symptoms and explaining, as you know, if they were old or usual or modified symptoms, using the homeopathic methodology and semiology. And after half an hour, the mortar was emptied. I took 1 gram of the C1 with 99 grams of the powder, so then we jumped to the C4 level, and again, half an hour later, we jumped to the C3 and then the C4, and all the participants were invited to exchange their ideas and feelings and to not by themselves the impression and symptom. And they were quite free to express their symptom the way they wanted to. And I was expecting a seriousness due to the date and the location of the experiment. And it was, on the contrary, amazingly relaxed and joyful throughout the day. And several provers began to sing at the top of their voices. And they showed them very light and relaxed behavior. And many provers during the experiment talked about the trees, about forest, about mushroom, the smell of the moss and the shade of the tall trees during the trituration. And they even thought that I was organizing the proving of a mushroom. And then the fagus is called the common beech, and you can find it throughout all the European continent. It's the third most frequent tree after the pedunculated oak and the sessile oak. And according to the European country, it represents about 10 to 15% of all the tree species. It's present in Europe for 5 million years, according to the fossilized leaves. And it faced the glaciation of the Quaternary period, and it disappeared and came back, but now it's really threatened by the global warming, which is the main reason for its diminished density. And we can keep in mind about this quite singular tree that it has a communal behavior restricted to its own species. It means when in a forest, when you have beech, only small beeches can grow in the undergrowth. And it's a fragile tree with regard to climate change, which can be seen as a kind of stiffness, of a lack of adaptability. And in the past, just for this historical aspect of this, the thing, the beech stylus were used by the German people to write the runes, and its German name, Buche, has been used for the German word for book, Buch. And the most prominent symptoms during the experiment were the yawning, relaxation, calm, let-go behavior. And for the physical symptoms, it was tense neck, shoulders, and the cervical vertebra, and the sensitivity to coldness. And the fact that the participants were quite relaxed highlighted the peculiar symptoms of the tense shoulder that is usually correspond to stress and tension in patients. And we had also many alternative symptoms during the successive potentization. You know, maybe it's always the case when you jump from a delusion to another one, but I noticed there was a meditative sensation alternating with logorrhea, relaxation alternative to with constriction, and they were singing at low voice, and suddenly they were all singing at loud voice. I think it was very interesting. And what was really remarkable was the strong desire to walk among the trees. They addressed the trees all along the experiment. And there's been a German proving of the same remedy with the German Jörg Wischmann. And the German provers also expressed this relaxation, well-being sensation, shoulder stiffness, cold legs, dry eyes, exactly as expressed by the provers in Strasbourg. And Jörg mentioned during a congress a cured case of rheumatic pain in hands and feet with pressing sensation and psychological constraint due to work overload of the patient. And after the treatment, the patient was relieved of her pains and she recovered a relaxed behavior in everyday life. So it was not exactly the same methodology, but you know, the outcome was really coherent. And I personally prescribe this treatment for people under pressure prone to lift and lock the shoulder. I think it's a thing of tension, of concentration. And I've tried to prescribe systematically Fagus in this indication. And some patients only reported transitory improvements of the shoulder pains, and I had to use another more individualized prescription to solve the problem. But other ones reported a greater satisfaction, and their cases enabled a more in-depth study of this remedy. And if I was to summarize the key symptoms that could give a successful prescription, I said that you have to find violent nature, even choleric nature, an eager action for open air and desire to walk in the woods, and tension episode with the shoulder symptoms. And in some cases, I noticed that on the X-ray, the cervical spine was much more affected than the lumbar spine. It means that must have been for a long time. The tension, global tension, could even be with hypertension. And I noticed this with a thin and non-smoking woman, but she had a family history of hypertension. And muscular tension linked to work overload. And in one case, the tension was not in the shoulders, but in the abdomen during pregnancy. But surprisingly, the love of forest, the evocation of underground, the pleasure in spending time with trees were not mentioned before these provings. With the other trees, people were not addressing this topic. And this keynote helped me to diagnose this remedy. And I think this small proving only opened the door to the discovery of the materia medica of Fagus, and the further experiment and cured cases should widen the site. So as a conclusion, I said that for these trees, as for the other one, the pathogenetic theme of tall trees appear to be archetypal issues. And these remedies should probably be acknowledged as polycrest when the clinical picture is greater. I also made a small experiment of the oak tree Quercus, and that is very tall and important tree for European people. And the same theme were present: the pressure, the rigidity, and also strength and weakness that seem to be a central key to access the understanding of this medicine. And I think it's well known for in the past for traditionally for alkaloid tendency. So trees being omnipresent in our landscape, it's meaningful to realize that they have a key role to play as homeopathic treatment. I hope with this presentation to induce many more provings and prescription of trees. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Renaud. Thank you so much for that amazing presentation. It's quite a treat on our side, especially as a lover of provers myself. I thought it was quite interesting that there was a general theme, especially for the first two, the sequoia dendron and the Cedrus libani, of the violence, the intense anger, the pain, and the suffering. So if we reflect now, especially as we're going through a lot of political uprisings and challenging authority and so on, these kinds of trees and maybe the remedies, emerging from these trees might be significant in terms of treating people nowadays, especially because of what people are going through. So that's quite, I also thought it was interesting that sequoia can be, as a differential diagnosis, we can look at bambusa and intervertebral disc as well, the SUI intervertebral disc, because they have similar type of symptomatology. What was also very nice for me was that I have a kid that I'm treating, that I'm giving lacleoninum to. But now I think I'm going to go with the Cedrus libani, because he's challenging his father, and I'm giving him lacleoninum and it's not working, but it looks similar, So thank you for that. And as with all provings, we have these lovely strange, rare, and peculiar. And with the last, the fagus, is the desire to be in the forest and walk among trees. That's also a beautiful symptom. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you for your proving insight, and continue to do more and share more with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I now hand you over to Dr. Bianca Dikanha Saya, who will now introduce Dr. Preeta Mehra. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Maharaj. So Dr. Preeta Mehra is the speaker that we will be listening to now. She is well known for her proving conducted on Withania somnifera. This proving took place between 2010 and 2013. She's been actively engaged in the Central Council for Research in Homeopathy, and today she presents as the final lecture of the LMHI Global Colloquium her presentation on Drug Proving Research Program of Central Council for Research in Homeopathy, the experiences and the challenges. Thank you, Dr. Mehra. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for introducing me. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, my greetings to all the panelists, the respected moderators, and the delegates who are attending this conference right now. And I'm also thankful to Dr. Manchanda and Dr. Anil Khurana for believing, having faith in me and my capability to bring this presentation of the Council, the 52 years journey of the Council. I hereby share my screen. So talking about the 52 years journey, the outline of my presentation will go like the initiation of drug proving research and the evolution of the research methodology, the challenges which were faced and the solutions sought for, the achievements of CCRH in drug proving program, and the road ahead. Talking about the milestones for this initiation, in 1963, Homeopathic Research Committee was constituted by Government of India, and this committee identified drug proving as an important research area. In 1969, the drug proving research program was initiated as a small venture at single center, and later on it came out as a multi-centric research program by CCRH. And it is continuing research activity since 52 years now. Why drug proving research? There were certain shortfalls in the proving trials done. There was unclear methodology, there was bias, and limited number of participants. The symptoms mentioned in Maitreya Medica, are they reliable, authentic, reproducible? So that's what even the previous speaker, Dr. Hover, was also indicating towards that same. So we all understand that research protocols have their own benefits. Standardized process, if we follow, it increases the likelihood of reproducibility and the reliability of symptoms. The symptoms identified in the drug proving form the baseline data for subsequent verification and validation studies, which are very, very essential. And that's how the final outcome will contribute to make an authentic homeopathic Maitreya Medica, which we need to give to the fraternity to make it as a clinic for the clinical applicability of the same. Then talking about the evolution from the dearth of clear methodology to development of the first drug proving protocol with the double blind technique, which was designed by CCRH in 1987. And this paper was published in British Homeopathic Journal in 1987 and was accepted worldwide. Dr. V.M. Nagpal, he was one of the researcher with the council, and this paper was published in BHJ in 1987. From 1987, the further there was the protocol has evolved. There has been changes. So the first modification this came up in 2007. The second revision was done in 2010. The third one in 2014. And there were very few amendments which were further done in 2015. The brainstorming was done on the structure of the document, how to document what all components we need to note down for the provers, what will be the test substance, what are all potencies you should be using, the posology, dose, frequency, the sample size, adverse event definition and handling, the analysis of the data, the quantitative and qualitative analysis, and the classification of symptoms. These were the key points where the brainstorming was done for the protocols and how they have evolved over the time. If we come to the comparison, just a small brief which I have prepared with this. So if we look at the sample size, it was not fixed and no defined protocol was there. But in 1987, the sample size was defined to minimum 30 provers at each center. And further on modification in 2007, 15 to 20 subjects, and subsequently it came to that at least we should have 15 provers at one center and maximum 20 provers. Age was defined from 18. Sorry, sir.
We can't see the hyperlinked document. You need to unshare and reshare.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Is it visible now?
Excellent. Thank you. We can see it now.
Yeah, thank you. So this comparison, the table of comparison which I have prepared for all this. So the sample size, then the age criteria, then about the controls. So there was no clear control guidelines. No controls were there in the first, but what I said, there was a dearth of clear methodology. And the first proving protocol in 1987 said like we should have 50% control, and then subsequently it has been modified to 30%. And similarly for the potency and dosage, there was like initially there was mother tincture proving, and the very low potency is 3x, 6x, and up to 1m. And the dosage was 21 doses were considered. In subsequent provings, the maximum 56 doses were given, and on further analyzing the data of the provings which were done with 56 doses, it was found that 12 doses was sufficient enough to produce the symptoms. So maximum symptoms which came out were within the 12 doses, and that has continued over the time. Then categorization of symptoms, there was no defined categorization. And subsequently, new symptoms, old symptoms, recurring symptoms, alternating symptoms, like that categories were formed. And then subsequently, when we had I will come to that. we had a harmonized protocol prepared with the help of Dr. Van Hesselen. And from there, we have made this new symptoms. And there was, if there is a change in the already existing symptoms, there is worsening or improvement, then C minus, C plus. And there is some recurring symptoms. And then record of possible causality of symptoms. That concept was also introduced. Adverse event reporting and understanding whether it is an adverse event or adverse drug reaction, that also we had taken up from HPC US, and Form G to be filled for the provers who have reported such events. Then adverse event reaction management. So initially, in the initial phases, Camphora 30C, that was considered as one of the antidotes for managing any adverse reaction. But over the time, it was like, again, with the discussions, we thought like we are not, camphora is usually considered for the vegetable kingdom. So whereas we are proving the animal remedies and mineral kingdoms. So we should not consider camphora as the only the antidote, but rather the totality of the bothersome symptoms which are expressed by the prover at some point of time. And so the proving master or the site investigator should have a free hand to understand that totality, make the totality, and also prescribe. And that also the antidote, whichever is given, should be noted down, and subsequently we can look into there is any possibility of correlating with this drug and understanding that yes, this can be used as antidote for that particular drug. Assessment procedures over the time, like again, there was no clarity and all, but there was a social desirability scale which was introduced, and again the things were analyzed and it was not found comprehensive with this. Then the VAS scale, the intensity of the symptoms, to understand the intensity of symptoms from 0 to 10, that continued. Washout period also, it was not clear, then not mentioned, and subsequently for it was considered for 2 weeks. And now we are considering a washout period after disappearance of the symptoms for 30 days. Coming back to the presentation, so the harmonized drug proving protocol. So it was an outcome of interactive workshop on harmonization of drug proving research program, which was organized by the council in September 2013 with Dr. Robert Van Hesselen. And the protocol is in consonance with the guidelines followed by LMHI, the European Committee for Homeopathy, and also from HPC US. So what was the outcome of the learning in this workshop? That there is a change in the strategy for antidoting or alleviating the severe or bothersome symptoms, which I have just told. There was clarity about the adverse events, defining it, handling it, and then how it is to be reported. The analysis of the proving symptoms with regard to grading and categorization and intensity was also introduced, and this was the learning. Challenges have been there to reach the goal. The main was like we have kept the age group from 18 to 60 years for proving, but the maximum provers are falling between 18 to 30 years. Again, the health status, because we say we need apparently healthy individuals. So the health status of the volunteers above this age group, we are not finding not many in this age group, above 30 years to 60 years. Then gender, females are more than males. Even Dr. Hoover has mentioned in his presentation this. Health status, we are finding there are deficiency diseases, vitamin D and vitamin B12 deficiencies are there, and there are unknown comorbidities which are existing. So which, because we are examining each of the volunteer, checking their health status with respect to doing all the investigations and with ultrasonography and chest x-ray and ECG, all those and blood parameters we are checking. So we are finding that there are certain deficiency diseases which are coming up, or the comorbidities are being found. Then characteristics of provers, there are both kinds, indolent or idiosyncratic, or even over enthusiastic. So what Dr. Hoover was talking about, that there is a lot of noise, symptoms. So that aspect is also there, and there is aspect of indolent. They don't express at times, or they don't reveal what I feel. That is the experience what I had in the last. Actually, I am handling this program for last 7.5 years, and the whole data which I have seen is expressing at in certain centers we are finding more of indolent provers. Then symptoms developed in few trials. There is paucity of symptoms, and placebo and nocebo symptoms are outnumbering the actual proving symptoms. So efforts have been made. So the council has prepared a training manual and module, and KABP questionnaire for the students. Orientation workshops have been organized for the faculty members of a number of homeopathic medical colleges in India. We have been encouraging the staff and patient attendants to participate so that we can get a broader age group. What I have mentioned was a shortcoming. The flexibility in the screening forms, but keeping it within the ethics. Then the pilot trials based on some fundamental aspects in drug proving are also taken up to address some of the challenges what we have faced. Talking about addressing the paucity of symptoms, we had a discussion with the experts in the homeopathic field in India, and referring to aphorism 129 of Organon of Medicine, they suggested that there should be increase in the dosage of the drug substance where we are finding the paucity of symptoms. So either the increase in dosage means the quantity of dose, that is like when we are giving for proving, we are giving a single dose as 4 pills 4 times a day for the first day. For all 3 days, 12 doses schedule, what I was telling. So we increase the quantity of dose from 4 pills 4 times a day on the first day, then 8 pills 4 times a day on the second, and 12 pills 4 times a day on the third day. So we have increased the quantity of the dose. And there was another, that there can be increase in the number of dosage. Instead of 12 doses, why don't we try with maximum 28 doses? So 4 doses per day for 7 days. So this pilot study was taken up, and to see the effect of increase in the number of pills, we had done a trial with 2 drugs. And in the Chirianthus cherry, when we did the first proving trial, it has shown that in the 6C potency, it has given 6 symptoms. And when we did the reproving trial with increased number of pills, what I'm telling you, for 4, 8, and 12 pills dosage, so Chirianthus cherry has not produced any symptom in 6C potency, but in the 12C, it has produced 2 symptoms. Again, in 30C, no symptom, and 200, 5 symptoms were produced, so total of 7 symptoms. Again, in this reproving trial, actually, we had introduced 2 more potencies also, 12 and 200. But if we look at it in 6 and 30, again, there were not much of response from the provers. The second drug was Demiana. In the proving trial, the first proving trial, in 6C, 11 symptoms were produced, and in the 30C, 8 symptoms were produced, so total of 19. And in the subsequent trial, where we had increased the dosage, the number of pills, Demiana has produced 23 symptoms in 6 and 12 symptoms in 30C potency, so total of 35. So it looks like that there has been some effect in case of Demiana. But we saw it, like we had done the proving at 2 centers in Lucknow and Bhubaneswar. In Lucknow, we didn't get any symptoms. It was 0, for both the potencies, whereas in Bhubaneswar, we have 11 and 8 symptoms in 6 and 30C. Subsequently, in the reproving in 2015-16 at Noida and Kolkata, these were the 2 centers where we had done the proving. Again, in Noida, in 6C potency, 11 symptoms and 6 symptoms, and Kolkata, 12 and 6 symptoms, respectively, in 6C and 30C potencies was produced. So coming to the effect of increase in number of doses to 28 doses, cucurbita pepo trial was done, and it was done with 12 doses schedule, and we got 8 symptoms. Whereas for the 28 dose schedule, we got more number of symptoms, definitely. and it was 109 symptoms. The second drug which we took for this trial, this pilot study, was Ibaris-Amara. And for this 12 doses schedule, 10 symptoms, but with 28 doses schedule, we had again 6 symptoms. So it was very dicey kind of a situation to say whether the increase in number of pills or increase in number of dose had some effect on the in producing the symptoms. So if we look at the graphical representation for Cucurbita-Pepo trial, when we had with the 12 doses schedule, this is the bar diagram for 60 potencies. That maximum 7 symptoms came up after 8 doses, and only 1 symptom came after the 12th dose. And in the reproving, again, we have seen how the graph has gone. So under 60 potencies, 28 symptoms were produced within 12 doses, whereas 42 symptoms were produced after 28th dose. So in between 12 and 28 dose, there were no symptoms were produced. But after 28 doses, there were 42 symptoms. In 30C, 15 symptoms were produced within 12 doses, and 3 symptoms were produced. 3 symptoms were produced after 20th dose and 20 symptoms after 28th dose, respectively. So apparently looks like that increasing number of doses to 28 has an impact in producing the more number of symptoms, but it is from a single center. Actually, the Kolkata center has given such data. So what we could decipher out of this, that there is no change in the number of symptoms generated with this alteration in the number of dose or quantity of the dose. Other pilot studies which are ongoing is for the assessment of susceptibility of provers towards the various potencies of the drug substances, and also assessing the sensitivity of the provers towards the drug substance. Talking about the achievements of the council, till date, 121 drugs have been produced, and out of these, 20 new drugs have been extensively produced by the council. Publications looking at, we have Central Council for Research in Homeopathy has published 7 volumes of homeopathic drug provings, which has covered the drug proving data of 92 drugs. I've already told training manual and module for drug proving has been published. There were 53 research articles which were published in CCRH Quarterly Bulletin. It is a non-peer-reviewed publication. Whereas 31 research articles have been published in Indian Journal of Research in Homeopathy, which is a PubMed indexed journal now. And there were 24 drug monographs which were published. Talking about the international collaboration, the council has been having this collaboration with international bodies. And this is one of the very, very important paper which was published, a systematic review of the quality of homeopathic pathogenetic trials, published from 1945 and 95. Subsequent to that, the findings in this review journal, we all know that heterogeneity in study design, sample size, outcome, diversity in the indices, and the methodological quality index showed that the reporting is of low quality. And the major question which arose from that was homeopathic drug effect is equivalent to placebo or it is otherwise. So need of another systematic review of HPTs published subsequently to assess any changes have occurred and also to find the answer for the unanswered. Scoping review was published. However, in 2016, the council had a MOU signed with the Royal London Hospital of Integrated Medicine to take up a systematic review and meta-analysis of HPTs published from 1996 onwards. However, we couldn't do it, but we could publish a scoping review article of the HPTs which were published from 1996 to 2018. Dr. Peter Fisher, I really miss him for this, but he was one of the authors for that. The literature search was done, electronic and manual. Search terms homeopathic drug proving and homeopathic pathogenetic trial with the time constraint, and for language, English language was only selected. Electronic search, bibliographic and trial registers and specialized, all these were done. manual searches, it was limited to CCRH library only. So these were certain limitations we had. If we come to the results, there were eligible records, 147 were found, and the peer-reviewed were 74 and 73 non-peer-reviewed HPTs. And the number of drugs which were covered in these HPTs were 214. The contributors mainly was from CCRH, then Dr. Rajesha, Dr. Relly, Dr. Koster, Massey. They all had their contributions in this when we looked out. And then heterogeneity was again encountered in these HPTs. So to conclude this particular publication of scoping review, this was a preliminary study with a vision of taking up a systematic review and meta-analysis of HPTs. And we look forward for guidance and support from the experts in the field to carry out this systematic review. And I believe that it will be a tribute to Dr. Peter Fisher as well. So leads which we got from that the previous systematic review was validity, reliability, and clinical applicability. And the answer, I believe, is that if we follow a standardized drug proving research protocol and do the clinical verification studies for the pathogenesis which has developed. Rationale for selection of drugs, it was suggested that toxic sources to human beings such as rejected substances in pharmacological phase 1 clinical trials could be a good candidate for HPTs. And to reflect this, Council has taken up HPTs for few banned allopathic drugs, cimetidine and omeprazole, which are antacids which were used across the counter, and subsequently the salts of these drugs have been banned. Also considering the active components like vincristine present in Vinca rosea. So these such ideas, such considerations have also come up in the council. Another major concern, which we have already talked about, whether the homeopathic medicines, the high dilution cause a change in the healthy volunteers or what the pathogenesis is found. A small initiative is like council has started drafting a checklist for assessment of likelihood of causality relationship between the artificial disease developed during the proving research trial and the investigational proving substance. So a team of experts in this field for validation process needs to be formed. For future endeavors, integration is the word and need to come together and join hands to strengthen the foundation of homeopathy. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll appreciate if any questions are there and any suggestions are there from the panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Mira, for your presentation. I know that from South Africa, we have many of our students listening to you today, and I have been totally blown away by the level of precision, how everything is fleshed out and all things are considered. I hope that your presentation speaks to our practitioners, speaks to the students of the world. You know, we're all students of homeopathy. I think you never stop being a student. And I hope that this gives us motivation and drive, and that these kind of research trials are really the very basis of our profession. So thank you very much for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you for such lovely words.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure. From what I can see, let me just quickly have a look. We didn't have any questions. I think I may have one. So previously our speakers have had some questions and they have answered them. But we have a question for you, and this question is, it is a wonderful experiment with different potencies and number of globules for the drug proving. But why 4, 8, and 12 globules used and not 1, 2, 3, or 4 globules?
Actually, we have defined the dose, one dose as equivalent to 4 pills of size 30, globule size 30. So considering that aspect, we have doubled it up from 4 to 8, and then from that addition of 4 pills. So that is the concept which we followed.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Let me just quickly have one look to see if we have one more. No, that's the same question. Thank you very much for your response. So on that note, I would like to thank the speakers for the session, Dr. Todd Hoover, Dr. Helene Renou, and Dr. Preeta Mehra. You have taken the great work of Dr. Samuel Hahnemann and fine-tuned and explored and come out with a perspective on provings that is truly awe-inspiring. For homeopaths of the world, I thank you for your continued work, or at least on behalf of the homeopaths of the world, I thank you for your continued work in this vital field of our profession and for solidifying our understanding of provings. With that, I would like to thank our Honourable Chairperson, Professor Ashley Ross, my fellow moderator, Dr. Madhu Maharaj, interpreters for their vital role of sharing this precious information, our attendees, both practitioners and students, and for all coming together on the Sunday to learn and to grow. The session is now closed, and we invite you to join us for the closing ceremony, which will follow shortly after this. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think actually our IT may actually request a photo.
I think
Wonderful
they
talks
usually
by
do.
all our speakers and very well moderated by our moderators. And a huge thank you to all our chairpersons. Before moving on to the valedictory session, I would like to grab this opportunity and thank all the delegates present over here. And since we are a one big happy family, let's hear it for all of us present out here. I would now request everyone to please unmute your lines and switch on the camera and give a huge round of applause for each one of us present out here who has presented. So let's hear it for all the presenters, speakers, moderators, and our chairpersons. Great work,
Congratulations.
great team effort by everyone. Thank you so much and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The valedictory session will start at 6 p.m. sharp.